Without further ado, it's time to bring out our players. So the first competitor, hailing from the United States, it's Muzzy.
Muzzy, of course, heralded for his incredible mechanical play and foresight when it comes to difficult combat situations.
And his opponent from China, it's JasonZhou.
With China yet to win a big tournament this year, it's Omega Zero and JasonZhou who are carrying the pride of the country.
Oh.
I have a slight edge in skill and preparation. I think that is what puts me in a spot to win over Jason.
Muzzy is a very skilled player, but I'm confident.
I know he has a lot of Chinese fans. I know they'll all be watching, so hopefully I can disappoint them and get the win.
He's top 3 player in this tournament, but I prepare, and so it will be 50-50. I don't worry about that.
Muzzy versus JasonZhou. Ready, set, go!
And there you can see the players getting ready for that first game. JasonZhou, of course, making his second World Championship appearance in a row. Top 4 at the 2016 World Championship.
Yeah, it's a tall order for you when you're coming into this one. But here you can see the bands line up, and wow, quite a big difference in what I've expected. I mean, Muzzy's lineup is looking pretty darn good against decks without Control Warlock in them. And he's chosen here to ban the Highlander Priest from JasonZhou rather than Warlock.
That's really interesting to me. One thing to note about the Warlocks, though, is JasonZhou is bringing a sort of a non-traditional, from a lot of people's perspective, no Cube and no Doom Guards, which tend to do a little bit better against some of the greedier control lists. And maybe that's why he decided to go for the Highlander Priest. He feels like he has a better chance against the Warlock across the board, but it's going to be tough.
It is quite an interesting contrast because Muzzy has brought the Dragon Highlander Priest, which I think has a little bit more gas against the slow, greedy Warlock that JasonZhou has brought. But we'll have to see how that matchup fares. I mean, he does have 2 aggro matchups, which could be quite good against a deck more focused on the end game as well. But this one, JasonZhou starts with Tempo Rogue, and I will say that I'd say traditionally in this matchup that Rogue is pretty favored. I do think that the Dragons add quite an interesting kicker to the matchup, though.
Yeah, they really do. You know, Netherspite Historian, since Dustbreaker is a class card, has a higher chance to discover that, so you have additional board cleared there. And Muzzy also in this Dragon Highlander Priest has decided to include Pint-Sized Potion plus Shadow Word Horror, which really gives him just an additional suite of removal against some of these tempo board-oriented style of decks. So I think Muzzy and the players that did bring Dragon Highlander Priest made a good read for the tournament, considering it's better against Tempo Rogue. It's also better in sort of those mirrors against traditional Highlander Priests.
So, something else interesting to note is that in JasonZhou's Tempo Rogue deck, there are no copies of Cold Blood. He's only got 1 copy of Elven Minstrel, 1 copy of Cobalt Scalebane, and he does have 2 Serenite Chain Gangs. So he does have quite a few cards that are more combat-oriented in terms of just fighting for the board, and I think that opens up a little bit of a weakness in this style of slow matchup where Serenite Chain Gang's really not that good, where Elven Minstrel is so important to be finding Vilespine Slayers, Leroy Jenkins, that sort of thing. So JasonZhou's overall power curve might have been slowed down enough that Muzzy could find this justification.
Yeah, and the 1 copy of Elven Minstrel also means that you're more susceptible to running out of gas against decks like Highlander Priest, which have a ton of removal spells. That's, you know, one of the ways that the Highlander Priest can win the matchup.
Muzzy's found himself in quite an awkward position here, though. If he chooses to go with Coin and Twilight Drake, his turn 4 is looking like a hero power. But if he doesn't do that, this turn's looking like a hero power. And these are the kinds of turns that Muzzy really wants to avoid when he brings a Dragon Highlander Priest. He wants to fill out his early curve and then be able to scale into that mid game with pressure. That's not going to happen this game, but JasonZhou's hand's not looking super hot either at this moment.
Yeah, and, you know, JasonZhou also threw away all the cards in the mulligan, and he passed on turn 3. So without the coin, Muzzy knows that JasonZhou's turn 4 is not going to be powerful, because you don't really just play many strong threats without coin, just straight up with 4 mana. It's, you know, Serenite Chain Gang, Elven Minstrel can't even be comboed, so Muzzy knows that he's got some time. He knows that this turn is most likely going to be pretty weak. And that's why, you know, he's willing to, I wouldn't even call it a risk, but play it a little bit slower.
Yeah. There's a nominal risk to it, and I'm thinking, you know, quite literally this turn exactly with the token and then Edwin Van Cleef. So a bit of pressure, but again, Muzzy's got some very strong tools to fight against this. And so now that JasonZhou's played the game so slow, that he had that early mulligan, that he saw the dagger up from Jason and the willingness to play this Edwin as a 4-4, I'm guessing Muzzy's starting to believe that JasonZhou's hand is quite heavy.
Yeah.
So Bone Mare is going to be very active on his mind, and I think that his mini game plan here is just to make sure he can keep the board clear going into Jason's 7-mana turn.
And also he saw the token from the Firefly plate. So that's, you know, a combo activator that Muzzy doesn't have to worry about. He can not play around, you know, those combo cards as much, say Vilespine Slayer or, I mean, Elven Minstrel, but you can't really play around that in much regard. But now Muzzy, a few options. He can utilize the coin here to get either the Draconid Opera Devil online or Raza. But Twilight Drake, huge body, contest the whole board.
This is like the bread and butter plays for Muzzy here. He's got a giant Twilight Drake. He's got Draconid Opera to follow it up. And I think that's really going to be one of his best ways to get past this. But he's thinking Raza to fight through this board. And this is quite an interesting play from my perspective. It's very clear that Muzzy's paying a ton of attention to just having something on board to chip away little stuff. I'm quite curious by this play.
Yeah, it does get the free hero power online, which in a tempo matchup can be beneficial because you can use all of your mana, and then you get sort of a bonus heal to either heal your minions out of range of some of the trades on board.
Swashbuckler with the patches. There's the Elven Minstrel. So we'll get this top hand fixed as quickly as possible to see what the pickups were in the meantime. But that Swashbuckler was a big draw for Jason, or otherwise this turn was looking awfully poor.
Yeah, that was pretty massive. He did have, you know, a good amount of opportunities to draw 1 mana spells, you know, something like a 40% chance to get something that costs 1 or less mana on that turn.
Yeah.
With the amount of cards that he had left in his deck, but still, if he had whiffed that with how expensive his hand already was, could have been pretty disastrous, because what would his turn have been?
And I love this play from Jason here. I think it's super important when you're playing Rogue to take the damage when it's available. In this matchup, if you play for value and your board gets cleared or gets dismantled, it's so hard to buy back that damage. And in this matchup, if he can put Muzzy in an awkward position by pressuring him consistently throughout, it means that Muzzy's going to be in situations where he doesn't feel like he wants to take a big risk, where he wants to try to play around a Leroy Jenkins or maybe a big Shadow Step turn or something. And even though Jason's giving up favorable trades, he's looking forward to that Bone Mare turn to take advantage of that.
This is sort of where a lot of players think that Muzzy shines, is in these, you know, sort of mechanical matchups with big boards. Muzzy, you know, touted as one of the best mechanical players in the entire world, and you know, we used to joke about it a little bit, that he got nervous on big stages because he was known as this point grinder. He's been the top point earner 2 years in a row, but this year he's really cemented some experience under his belt. You know, he won a DreamHack earlier this year. He top 8 in another one. You know, he was at the Spring Championship in Shanghai. Had an early exit, but still gave him that experience. And so now we can't even joke about that anymore because it's just not even true.
Yeah, and the other thing to think about, too, is just the success he's had in terms of just his professional career. He recently joined Tempo Storm. It's one of the biggest organizations in terms of Hearthstone. And, you know, the big win at Trinity series alongside Zalay and Chalky for that one, they really demonstrated how collectively that all of those little pieces mattered. Zalay with the simplicity of thought, Chalky with the overall planning, and then Muzzy with combat mechanics. You know, everything's come together full circle this year for him.
It's kind of funny because that Trinity series lineup built a Tempo Rogue the day after the expansion came out that's almost identical to the Tempo Rogue that players are bringing today.
Yeah.
That's kind of crazy to think that a day after the expansion came out, they had settled on a list that's still being played at a competitive level. So, brilliant minds. And right now, though, Muzzy, he does have minions, but he doesn't have any type of removal to deal with a wide board state.
And this is one of the issues you can run into with Dragon Highlander Priest. Is that your hand just gets kind of clunky, and if you're getting heavily pressured, it's difficult to come back from it. Now, the Elven Minstrel activation, picking up that Swashbuckler, absolutely massive. JasonZhou finds another 1-cost minion, activates the Vile Spine. And kind of going back to that turn 4 where Muzzy had coined out Raza, the big thing to think about was how would Muzzy have handled a Cobalt Scalebane had he just played Twilight Drake? And looking forward, if he had run into Cobalt Scalebane that turn and played Twilight Drake, I think this game would just be over.
Yeah.
But in this situation, he gave himself, I think, some life and some hope, and I think the Vile Spine might just be too much for him to really overcome.
Yeah, he doesn't have a way to clear the board. Even if he novice engineers, he wouldn't be able to find anything. And he's rolled into a Bone Mare turn, and we talked about earlier how he probably would have that read that Bone Mare was in the hand because of JasonZhou's dead start. So he's expecting to be hurt going in the next turn.
He does pick up Anduin, and he has Greater Healing Potion in hand.
He still needs a few turns for Anduin, and a few turns with Rogue, they can develop a giant board. And JasonZhou should know that he's free to play Bone Mare.
Yeah, well, the thing about it is that the Raza also has given Muzzy the benefit of that life total as well. So he goes back up to 17 here. He has a Greater Healing Potion, Shadow Word Death next turn to help fight off the Bone Mare turn.
He might be able to stabilize in this.
That Anduin might have been the most important draw of this match thus far, and a lot of it, again, boils down to coining out that Raza. How many people wouldn't have taken the Twilight Drake value in that situation? Like, this is as big as it's going to get. I still get to keep the coin this way. Think about that trade that JasonZhou made into the Raza as well. He did use his health total to do that, but if he had simply pushed that damage, would he be in a little bit of better shape? I'm not sure. And it looks like Jason's going to take Vile Spine value here instead of taking the Bone Mare value, so that might buy Muzzy even more time.
Bone Mare on 7 is very tough to pass up, even with a 4-9 on the board. That one's... And now every time he plays Bone Mare, he's going to be susceptible to Shadow Reaper.
This is quite a brilliant play from JasonZhou because it does play around the Shadow Word Death in Muzzy's hand. So not going for Bone Mare actually yields him more pressure on the following turn. That is quite important as well.
Bone Mare does have, a ton of uses post Shadow Reaper Anduin anyway. A lot of times as the Tempo Rogue, you're trying to kill him before that even happens.
Yeah.
But a lot of times you can combo with South Sea Deckhand to get the immediate 6 damage in with a dagger equipped, or just to build a giant board after Anduin with Corridor Creeper, Bone Mare, presenting usually too many stats for him to deal with outside of big removal. And Muzzy's digging.
This is desperate.
This is very desperate.
And Geist is not it. That is a tech card meant for many other matchups than this one.
I mean, Geist will destroy 2 of Muzzy's own spells and none of JasonZhou's. He's got a Power Word Shield and a Holy Smite still left in the deck.
Solid play. It's up to 14 points of pressure here for Jason this turn. But he is fully expecting Anduin.
Yeah. Probably wants to Bone Mare the smallest targets. That way he has the most power on the board post Anduin if that were to happen. So, of course, that would be the Flame Elemental.
It's no more trades for Jason, it looks like. Well, there's one. I don't know about that.
Well, that means that he can't double trade into... Yeah, I guess so, because there would have been a 3-2 anyway. So post Anduin, he hero powers 1 down, and then the 2 1-attack minions can't trade into something else because at that point the SI7 agent would have 3 health. So that one's a little interesting.
Muzzy also has drawn the Shadow Visions this turn, so this is a point where it's so important for Muzzy to have been mentally alert. How many spells does he have left? Because Dragonfire Potion here would actually clear the board and give him a better Anduin setup on the following turn, perhaps.
7 spells, I believe. He could find either Shadow Word Horror or Dragonfire Potion.
I don't know. I mean, this looks like it's good enough to keep him alive for another turn. 6 points of pressure out for Jason. He's got 4 more in hand with Bone Mare. But the Shadow Vision's also great follow-up for Anduin when you have a 0 cost 2 damage hero power.
Well, also, we have to think, you know, what's the math on Muzzy killing JasonZhou next turn?
That is a lot of damage.
Like a Velen draw.
This is like the most important spot of the game here now for Muzzy. He has to fade Leroy Jenkins. And he has to clear this board off. But he is very close to getting both of those jobs done. Deep breath from Muzzy.
I mean, there's a lot going on right now. One, he has to calculate how much maximum damage he has, because you don't want to get to the stage and, you know, Shadow Vision's not find what you need.
JasonZhou doesn't look comfortable either.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is Muzzy has to think about how these hero power iterations work out prior to starting this chain. If you miss calculate, you place him in the wrong spot, everything could go awry.
Yeah. So Dragonfire pushing would be enough. Shadow Horror would not be, because the Bone Mare target right now, which I believe is the Vile Spine Slayer, wouldn't quite reach it.
And that didn't feel like a lot of time to me.
Yeah, but still a full board clear, but I mean, he's dead to Leroy. He's also dead with Power of Tentacles to South Sea Deckhand.
Oh, that's right. There's one copy of that is gone.
Yeah, so he's got one South Sea Deckhand in order to get there.
Muzzy's just going to burn the pint size for 2 damage as well. Shadow Step is not a good draw for Jason at this juncture. I mean, Kellis' Shadow Step's great, but not on turn 10.
Definitely not.
So now, though, the South Sea Deckhand, you know, that would close the game as well. The Power of Tentacles kind of muted in that spot. You know, is it good enough for Jason to you know, maybe just Power Tentacles the Kellis? Just have it as a 4/8 body. Again, that 0-cost hero power, though, is putting a ton of pressure on Jason, sticking a threat to the board. He's going to load up the Cobalt Scalebane.
Well, it's vulnerable to Shadow or Death, and now Muzzy is getting ever closer to that lethal damage. Blood Mage Thalnos drawn.
I think that's exactly 18 points of damage for Muzzy.
He can play Blood Mage, Mind Blast,
Acolyte, and Shadow or Death.
Acolyte and Shadow or Death.
So that's 5 hero powers he gets, 6 from Mind Blast.
I think it might be slightly off.
It's 2 off, is that maybe? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, he's 2 off, I'm sorry.
But I mean, he's in a good position. He's going to give JasonZhou another turn. And now it's only Leroy for JasonZhou that would do it. Actually, no, South Sea Deckhand would do it as well because of the Shadow Step that was drawn.
Beast. It's still not enough to save Muzzy from Leroy Jenkins, but that does now protect him from South Sea Deckhand.
South Sea Deckhand Shadow Step, he's now protected. And I think that's the last turn for Jason.
It has to be Leroy. And it's not. And that means Muzzy, despite the heavy pressure from JasonZhou, is just barely going to get out of this game.
That was a 7% odds for Leroy. Not very likely. I mean, JasonZhou can think, well, maybe he doesn't have enough playable cards in his hand to be able to kill me, but oh, he's got plenty. I think this is when you print Shadow Step prints.
Just look at Jason's face. He's like, wow, really? It's like, I thought I had this one in the bag. He was so close.
So close.
You know, I looked to the couple of trades that Jason did. I looked to the foregoing Bone Mare on turn 7. Could he have pushed enough damage to end this game sooner?
I think he might have been able to.
I'm not sure. I mean, it's a completely different timeline you're in when you go down that road. But Muzzy's taking a 1-0 lead in a crucial matchup.
Even though that Dragon Highlander Priest fares a little bit better, I feel it's still not a great matchup. Temper Rogue a lot of times can just get there.
I watched Soleil play. It was a best of 11 versus I believe it's Board Control, of just Highlander Priest versus Tempo Rogue. And the one thing I noticed was that over and over again, when Zhou's opponent was just simply going face with damage, even though he was getting favorable clears and great spots, it wasn't enough to recover.
Yeah, it's hitting him in the face is a good thing. But game 1 is in the books. Muzzy takes a 1-0 lead. The points leader for America's 2 years in a row. Let's get to know Muzzy. You're out of a job.
It's a true story.
But there you can see some of the stats from Muzzy. A lot of times that big victory eluded him, despite him being so successful on ladder and in the Hearthstone competitive points grind. But found a victory this year. DreamHack Montreal found a couple top 8s this year. Made it to a championship in Shanghai, and then at the end of it all, finished on top of points once again. It made it here via last call. Despite a neck-and-neck race with Zhou. Basically all the way up until that win at DreamHack Montreal when Zhou kind of tapped out and said, you know what, you got me.
It was pretty much impossible for her to come back in that stage.
Yeah,
once Muzzy had passed him in that standings. But yeah, it was neck and neck right there the entire way. Muzzy, you notice full mulligan on his opening hand despite having the one drop, despite having the South Sea Captain. I believe the cards he's looking for in this matchup are really big buff territory, and then Corridor Creeper and Bittertide Hydra.
Yep.
Against Warlock in particular, those are such vital cards because JasonZhou's deck is going to have a ton of ways to clear Muzzy's board. And when that's the case, it means that he just needs to do anything he can to buy reliable damage, and that's exactly what the big boys do.
Yeah, he does only have one copy of the Bittertide Hydra. He definitely, it feels like he teched his Aggro Druid for, the faster decks for the Mirrors and for Tempo Rogue with double Galak Crawler. He's got a Mark of the Wild in his Aggro Druid list, which is really interesting. It's not something we've seen, for people who may not know what Mark of the Wild is because they haven't seen it. 2-mana spell, +2/+2, and taunt to a minion. So, back in the day, it was kind of teched in. You'd also play the Black Knight, so you could activate your own Black Knight.
We're going way back.
We're going way back, but it is
Hearthstone back in 1986 was a great game.
But also the one thing you have to do in this matchup is play around the various types of removal the best of your ability,
Ooh. Now Savage Roar looks a lot more appealing into that Tar Creeper than it did just a turn earlier. That is a big draw, that Bloodsail Corsair.
Yeah, he can also trade off his patches to play around Defile a little bit more.
Still the 1 health minion on board with the Cobalt, and I think that's something Muzzy's going to contemplate.
Well, at that point, it's like, well, do you want to play around Hellfire or do you want to play around Defile?
No.
And if you can't play around either in a meaningful way,
the thing about it here
you
is
smack him in the face.
If he attacks face here, it's just free damage either way. JasonZhou has a Defile set up, it'll clear his board, open the way for Bittertide or Living Mana. Or if JasonZhou feels like he has to trade in the 1/5 then Hellfire afterwards, that still opens up the Living Mana. So both of these plays were designed to have these be his finishing cards, the exact 2 he has in hand. That's why he went for that super aggressive mulligan in the early game. Uh-oh. That pulls out the Bittertide Hydra for the Defile.
It does. You put a lot of damage on Muzzy, but you also give him a free 8/8 that's in play. I guess it would be an 8/4 after everything's said and done, but at the moment, Defile wouldn't even be like a full because it would stop at that 4 health mark and just leave the Druid of the Swarm up.
Oh
man.
My. Jason does not look happy about that.
So if Muzzy plays Living Mana here, he forces out a Hellfire, and he'd be left with a Bittertide Hydra. JasonZhou would go down to 11 health, and he would be dead to Mark of Yasharaj Hero Power the next turn.
The thing I'm looking at is I'm not sure that JasonZhou is doing anything other than possess Lackey and coin the Dark Pact next turn.
That's true, yeah. Because he does not have Doom Guards in his list. He only has the Void Lords.
That's right. And so Muzzy, anticipating what looks like something just like that, says more pressure is better. If I force the Hellfire here, it means I have some draws for lethal outs.
Yeah.
There's zero chance of that, as you can see the speed at which JasonZhou has done this. But now Mark of the Lotus is a fantastic draw for Muzzy. Granted, it's only 2 cards left out of that deck, but if it showed up, look out.
And this is going to be rough because now this Bittertide Hydra, if it doesn't go into the Void Lord, Hellfire, if it goes into Void Lord, Hellfire clears up his board. If it doesn't, Hellfire plus the Void Lord attacking in still clears it up. Yep. So Muzzy is in a very bad spot.
You can see how tough of a matchup this is. It's like every step of the way, Muzzy's being pressured to have a nigh perfect setup. You know, just even from the mulligan stage, you can kind of see the desperation there. And now it's starting to, that interest is starting to compound. And JasonZhou looks like he's primed to take almost full control of this game. Muzzy has 2 buffs left in his hand, plays no card this turn. JasonZhou's at 22 and is about to clear this entire board. It just really doesn't get much better than this.
And because of the Dark Pact, he's free to keep tapping because his health total is in such a good spot. He knows Muzzy doesn't have really anything left, and Power of the Wild will allow him to make a token for Mark of Yasharaj in order to get the card draw, but he's going to need a lot of help. And with JasonZhou picking up second Hellfire, even like a second Living Mana wouldn't even be enough.
It really is on this this 5/4 Panther to get a lot of work done.
Next turn he can make it a 7/6. Actually, can make it an 8/7.
Your magic shall not
anymore.
Nope.
Now it's just time for dudes and fight for the board. Playing arena here for a turn or so.
Trust me.
Wow. The worst draws in Muzzy's deck at this point. The assault was squelched.
Do you just load them all up and hit him in the face?
I have no idea.
We're talking with Sottle backstage. We were watching one of the first series, and we were talking about how even in almost insurmountable odds that with Aggro Druid you always stay in the game because of that chance that you draw Living Mana. But even at this stage, JasonZhou has a check for it.
Yeah, Muzzy is this play is designed to buy more time. He's Living Mana still can, in theory, win the game from Muzzy's perspective. I mean, we see JasonZhou's hand. I mean, everybody knows, except Muzzy, that he is dead. And now Muzzy might, in fact, know that he's quite dead. And this is how Aggro Druid operates. It tries to punish your opponent before they're able to get a stabilizing moment. And if you cannot, your deck flounders around quite a bit. It is stuffed full of 1 and 2 mana cards.
Yeah, it does have some reload with Living Mana. You know, oftentimes your opponent can, clear a couple boards and then you Living Mana and they don't have anything to answer it. But oftentimes after that first or second push is thwarted, you're done for. And this Skulking Geist is going to destroy 2/3 of Muzzy's hand.
Oh.
I concede.
There it is.
Game 3 is coming up. JasonZhou ties it at 1 apiece. And there you can see why Warlock is often a ban strategy for a lot of players.
Yeah.
In almost every single matchup, Warlock is going to have the ability to do something similar to that. And even though he's teched for more slow and greedy matchups, JasonZhou still smooth sails to an easy victory.
Yeah, that's right. And the Aggro Druid seems like it's not performing that well, but we have a very small sample size. A lot of players went to it, but most of those players are banning Warlock. But we'll have to see. Series is tied up 1-1. Is it going to be JasonZhou or Muzzy that pulls ahead? We'll find out right after this. Welcome back, everybody. It's time for game number 3 between JasonZhou and Muzzy. It's all tied up 1-1 as one of these players is looking to break away. And, we've talked a lot about Muzzy and his success this year, but JasonZhou has not been a slouch at all in 2017.
He hasn't?
No.
I thought making it to the world stage 3 times in a single circuit year, as well as a Gold Series win with a couple of top 4s, following up on your top 4 from the World Championships on the previous year was, it's all right.
It's all right. No, it's pretty darn good. And JasonZhou has become sort of a staple name for people that have watched, all the championships throughout the year. But You know, we haven't seen, outside of JasonZhou making it to the World Championship, China has not had success at all. So he's sort of like, you know, along with Omega Zero, their last hope to round off a year in a good way.
Well, this is a pretty good opening hand for JasonZhou and a pretty, what now I would call mediocre hand for Muzzy at this point. This is really one of the matchups that Aggro is trying to prey on, is Rogue. While Rogue certainly has some great tempo ability and some strong swing turns, it doesn't have a lot of swing turns. It's not really entirely focused on that. It's more focused on the super important moments from it. So when JasonZhou has this fast start and he picks up Corridor Creeper before the minions die, it means he's matching Muzzy's Corridor Creeper that, yeah, it looked like he was mulliganing for. So this SI7 agent plus this Alcide deckhand is going to be some great fighting power for Muzzy, but afterwards his hand gets quite heavy or just quite weak. So next couple draws, I think, super paramount for him if he wants to really fight off JasonZhou's pressure.
You know, Muzzy does have a smaller curve than a lot of the Tempo Rogues in the tournament. He runs double Tar Creeper instead of the Serenite Chain Gangs. There's a Cold Blood in there, Sonya's Shadow Dancer. It's a little bit faster than the very old.
Oh no! That is the worst draw possible. It's not that Muzzy drew patches. A lot of times sometimes it'll affect things, obviously, but this setup was designed specifically to fight that 1/5 taunt. That's no longer an ability, and this might be crippling.
He does have the ability to patches plus Cold Blood, or the other way around. Or I guess, yeah, he could have patches, Cold Blooded it, traded in, and then traded off the 1/3.
There's so much less power he's got on board.
It's so much less power that he's got on board, and also to play around, well, I guess he would have played around buffs the same way. I think he just wants the dagger available, so next turn he can Southsea capped in, charge the patches in, and get that little bit of extra power, have the dagger, and maybe a Corridor Creeper setup in that vein as well, because he has more ability to clear off additional minions the next turn.
You know, I'm going to be perfectly honest. I wasn't even paying attention to Cold Blood in that turn, and that pulled a lot of weight.
It did.
JasonZhou's hand is quite slim at this point, but the Corridor Creeper's a lot of pressure. Muzzy can somewhat match it.
But
oh, this is interesting. Look at this. So Muzzy now, next turn, he's going to have what looks like a free Corridor Creeper with the Bile Spine Slayer. So the timing of it, even though JasonZhou pulls ahead by a turn, Muzzy gets to answer it back with a big tempo play. Oh my gosh, I think I way overreacted to the patches draw in hindsight. I just literally didn't see the Cold Blood.
Well, the Cold Blood, you know, it's in there for a few reasons. It does give you, you know, just some extra pressure against, say, Priest. I think that's the biggest thing. It just allows you to kill him faster, hit him in the head faster. Especially considering that Priest does lack removal for big stuff early on, outside of Shadowwood Death before Anduin. They don't have a way to deal with, like, you know, say a Firefly that's cold-blooded. That can be pretty tough for them to deal with. A lot of times they can get in recurring damage. But also it does just give you an extra tool early on to fight in these tempo battles. So, and that is going to be a Corridor Creeper plus Bile Spine Slayer, and Muzzy looks like he's completely turned the corner.
The importance of that SI7 agent early on saved him so much life. It's insane to think about. And even though this turn's going to chew through a lot of Muzzy's board, you know, this is where that Elven Minstrel plays such a big role. It's why he's included 2 copies of it. Even in these weak turns, you can get 2 minions online, set up the Bone Mare afterwards.
Ooh, Tar Creeper drawn. This is... He doesn't have any way to get past the Tar Creeper, and then he's dead the following turn because he pushes damage this turn, and then also can trade in smaller minions into the Bittertide Hydra the following turn.
Oh, that's a good point, actually, is that Muzzy does have the ability to just pressure straight towards the face. I mean, JasonZhou doesn't have patches left, so like a Savage Roar turn is kind of out of the question with a charge minion.
Yeah, pressure the face.
I mean, if you hit them in the face, then they have less life. Wow, interesting. And this is an important illustration, too. If your opponent doesn't kill off a priority minion, that's usually a sign that you can ramp up the aggression. Yep. Corridor Creeper didn't die. Muzzy says, why not? I can kill him first.
That's more than enough damage going into the next turn. I believe even through the taunt because of Bone Mare, because of the small tokens representing more damage through the Bittertide Hydra. He can hero power off one of them. Yeah. No, he's not going to quite get there. He Bone Mares the 3/4. He could attack for 5 and then deal 1 additional damage.
It's pretty much locked up.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Where's the out is really my question.
Can't kill him this turn, but can definitely kill him on the next 2 turns. He's going to put JasonZhou in a position where he can't even trade with the Bittertide Hydra.
Just trade it off even.
Yeah.
And it puts him at 4. I mean, you're getting almost identical pressure out of that, except you're taking a 9 power minion off board.
Yeah.
JasonZhou fails to find a way to follow up on his early game. And despite the patches draw, Muzzy uses the Cold Blood, a card that's quite weak in the matchup, to a major benefit.
And Aggro Druid seems like it's continuing to struggle. It's not finding wins against any of the matchups that deck is going to be seeing a lot throughout the tournament. We're talking, just Tempo Rogue, which theoretically it should get on the ground faster than that deck and be able to pressure it.
It's a true story, but it's a feast or famine style of strategy. It's either going to work really well or look like it fails miserably.
And as we get set up for game number 4, talk about JasonZhou a little bit. JasonZhou has been to a world championship before, just last year, 2016, with his top 4 finish. And he knows now coming into this tournament that there is a lot on the line. You're right, Jason. You're a great businessman. Nobody could have negotiated a contract that good.
Nobody. Look, you figured $1 a minute for a massage. That's quite a nice tax you add on to the top of that prize pool.
It's not quite $250,000 level, but just an added bonus for JasonZhou. Pretty funny. He's just a funny guy to be around. We've had a chance to spend so much time with him since he's at every event.
I remember in the Spring Championships in Shanghai, TJ and I are sitting in the interview room, and Jason just walks right in, and there's so much space in there. He sits right down next to TJ and just puts his arm around him like they're old friends, and we just start chatting it up. And it wasn't really much of an interview as much as it was Jason just storytelling time and entertaining us. And 45 minutes later, he's just in the exact same position, arm around TJ's telling great stories.
Yeah. What a guy. Yeah, he used to play on the America servers because he lived in the U.S. for a while. That's why, he does speak English. But it's been in China now for a long time. He used to be known as a Control Warrior player. A lot of players used to fear him on the America's ladder because he was so good at Control Warrior back when it was sort of a staple deck in the meta. It has fallen out, quite a bit. But, he still does have that proficiency for control decks, even now so. Definitely a player to be feared, as are almost everybody in this field of 16 here at the World Championship.
The roles reverse now, and Muzzy on the Aggro Druid. We continue to see Rogue offsetting these early starts from the Aggro Druid players. Muzzy's trying to pressure down JasonZhou as quickly as possible. Every time he loses a minion, that's a strike against that.
The scourge will devour all.
Looking very similar.
Rogues have had the coin, though. I mean, that's a big benefit to them. And JasonZhou, what is going on? This is like a replay of the last game. Which could be bad for Muzzy.
Exactly. He has a Quarter Creeper in hand on exactly turn 3 with Southsea Captain in play. After the turn that he coined out SI7 agent, he draws patches.
Come, try your luck.
Sonya's a good one to have in that spot, though, but Muzzy is going to be able to fight through this. Like, Sonya is strictly a tempo play here. I'm actually a little surprised that JasonZhou chooses this one, because this gives Muzzy a decisive path to handling the board.
Especially over just playing Southsea Captain, because then next turn you could play Sonya plus a buffed patches, and then get the buffed patches back if you trade it in.
That's if it trades.
That's if it trades,
Crypt Lord's a big one to have to trade over.
True, but, say he buffs it, But I like getting at least some kind of immediate value out of Sonya, or presenting it on a board that makes it tougher to remove over another priority target. Whereas here, SI7 agent's not nearly as much as a priority target as Sonya. Whereas, let's say he has a wider board with Southsea Captain on it as well. Maybe all of a sudden it becomes a little bit tougher to trade that off. But
Muzzy going with the token over the Enchanted Raven as well. He sacrifices that little bit of extra power to not give up some information to JasonZhou.
It's also more likely to survive with Savage Roar in hand if there were a second SI7 agent or backstab.
Trust the pirate's code. I'm in charge.
And that Crypt Lord, that is a massive nuisance to JasonZhou right now. It's kind of growing out of control, honestly. And Muzzy finds a corridor creeper here as well.
Little late,
Well, I
but
mean,
still going to be good.
that can come online this turn. He can simply trade in his 1/2s and get it done, but that's a lot of Savage Roar pressure he gives up.
Yeah.
If that's the case.
He can do that plus play the Enchanted Raven and try and roll into Savage Roar, but it is much less powerful at that stage.
Does he have an interesting clear, maybe with Savage Roar to get the Corridor Creeper online? Yeah, this is really where the game plan for Druid can get tough, is you have to make these razor-thin calls on, is it better to clear off and play for board, or is it better to outright pressure my opponent and look for reach? It's a difficult call, and it has to be made basically this turn for Muzzy, so he's got to account for everything possible.
Yeah, and if he plays, just hero power and tries to value trade, all of a sudden he can't play Corridor Creeper.
Can't just delay it, too. I mean,
Yeah, I like the delay. Because now he still presents a wide board for Savage Roar, but Corridor Creeper is just going to get cheaper, so he may be able to make a little bit bigger of a swing turn.
the one difference
Going
here
into
is that JasonZhou does not have Vile Spine Slayer on his Corridor Creeper turn. Remember, Muzzy had that, and it was enough to overcome the situation.
But he does have a way to get over this Crypt Lord finally with a buffed South Sea Captain, the dagger up. He has 7 damage and can get this Corridor Creeper down. So while he didn't find the Vile Spine Slayer, he found a way to still preserve all of his board.
Very similar.
And get the Corridor Creeper down. So and when you have to Savage Roar to trade as the aggro Druid player, you're probably in a rough spot unless you got a Living Mana or a Bittertide Hydra tucked away in that hand, and he does not. He could fully trade off his board with Savage Roar and Corridor Creeper.
It's not the worst spot in the world for Muzzy, but it gets quite dire here. I mean, on average, JasonZhou's draw is going to be better than Muzzy's at this point. There are some exceptions to that rule, of course, with the notable one being Living Mana. That would be very close to lights out for JasonZhou at this point.
He could also think about a value trade here by attacking the South Sea Captain with his face and then trading over the Swashbuckler.
I think it's something he's highly considering as well.
Because that would either force the face hit from JasonZhou, which he would take extra damage anyway, and the dagger up at this stage, or he would have to trade in South Sea Deckhand. So I do like that trade.
Oh my. Well, it's not the worst one because of the Evolving Spores, but this is a very close game right now, and it's going to boil down to who draws more heat, I think.
Yeah, and Muzzy, it's hard to say who has the better draws off the top because Muzzy has the two, kind of lights out cards with Living Mana and Bittertide Hydra. But JasonZhou also has, some big threats, himself with if he sticks a minion on the board, all of a sudden Bone Mare's online. If he has things that he can keep in his hand, Elven Minstrel can get him the gas that he needs. But I think that Muzzy has overall, from the top of his deck, more chance to draw that big bomb.
Something really cool to look at is the difference in the tempo builds. Wow. Evolving Spores first. So he's just going to straight up try to value trade off. I mean, there was 2 options that cleared off the Corridor Creeper with Poisonous and with +3 attack.
Yeah.
So a pretty reasonable chance to have that happen. Oh my.
Yep.
That is a huge draw for Muzz. I wanted to point out the Serenite Chain Gangs in JasonZhou's deck that were not found in Muzzy's Tempo Rogue deck at the cost of 1 Elven Minstrel and 1 Tar Creeper. And Corridor Creeper drawn at 7 mana while he's facing down this board. Living Mana was the card for Muzzy to draw.
Yeah.
And now Power of the Wild, Mark of the Lotus. It's just any other big card to follow this up again. I think JasonZhou might have gotten pushed out of this game. Mark of the Lotus. That's 7 more damage. And that's going to put JasonZhou to
1 health?
1 health with a Leroy, a Firefly, and a Corridor Creeper, and nowhere close to killing Muzzy.
And that's just going to lock things up. Serenite Chain Gang drawn, but it's not going to be enough. He just needs to push through 1 point of damage.
Wow.
JasonZhou taps out. Muzzy takes the series 3-1. Finding the win with Aggro Druid. That's what it's designed to do.
You pit your wits and will against luck, and you let the cards decide the rest. The early game went fairly even for both players. Muzzy played very defensively, taking the value trade with the Enchanted Raven, being patient on the Savage Roar, and netting a Corridor Creeper from it. Happens to draw a living mana, and that's all she wrote.
Still a lot of work left to do for Muzzy, though. He'll go up against the winner of Kalento versus Samuel Sao. But a good start for a player that many had pegged as their favorite. But now let's go ahead and get a few words with our winner on stage with Raven.
Thanks a lot, TJ. Congratulations, Muzzy, on the win. Going into this matchup, did you feel favored? Were you confident, or did you think it could have gone the other way?
I definitely felt confident. I ran a lot of sets against Jason's lineup, and through that, I didn't drop a single one. I know the matchups are very similar, but the tech decisions I had in my deck, I felt like gave me an edge in a lot of the matches.
Okay, and you actually ended up winning 2 extremely close games, the Priest early on, and then the one we've just seen, the one you just came off the back of winning. Did you feel like, for example, in the last one, the Living Mana was the only card you needed to draw to get that win? Was there anything else in the deck that could have sort of pulled you out of that spot?
Yeah, I had 2 Living Manas and a Bittertide Hydra. The Hydra was less good because it was vulnerable to potentially a Vilespine Slayer, but pretty much it was either of those 3 cards, and I was fortunate enough to get one of the Living Manas.
Okay, and how are you feeling as confident with the group as a whole? Do you think, especially after having the 1 win in the bag now, you're going to feel great about coming out of the group?
Yeah, I definitely feel good about my group. It's a lot of close matchups, some people would say, but like I mentioned earlier, I feel like I have a slight edge, so getting the win here definitely gives me an advantage.
Okay, well, congratulations again, Muzzy. Let's hear it from Muzzy one more time, guys, as we go back to TJ.